Hello students, and welcome back to the e-learning program initiated by Shree Gyanmanjari Vidyapeeth for Standard 10, in which we are learning the subject of social science. A lot many lectures have been taken since the program was started, and in those lectures we have completed the explanation of chapter number 1 and 2 of history, that is heritage of India and cultural heritage of India, in which we understood handicrafts and fine arts. Now we start with another chapter of social science, standard 10, in which we are going to start the sub-subject of social science, that is geography. The very first chapter of geography, that is chapter number 8, is natural resources. Chapter number 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13 and 14, they are of geography. Out of that we are going to start with the first chapter of geography, that is natural resources. Let us start with the introduction to the chapter. First we are going to learn and understand what is a natural resource, why is it very important for us, what is the need of the natural resource, what are the different uses of natural resources. Human needs can be satisfied partially or completely through resources. Now the very first word that comes to mind is resources. Now what is a resource? Resource is the elements that are available to us in the nature, and there are lots and lots of resources that are available to us in the nature, but only those which are utilized by man through his special knowledge and expertise and can transform that for his own use, then that type of natural element is called a resource. For example, we have wooden chairs at home, wooden sofa sets, wooden dining table, cupboard made out of wood, and lots of other furniture that is made out of wood. Now, from where do we make this furniture, the table, the chair? We make it from wood. Then wood is the material from which we make tables or chairs. Now where do we get wood? That is the jungles, the trees. Then tree is a resource from which we get wood. The jungle is a bigger resource where lots of different types of trees are available for serving us in different ways. So the jungle or the forest is considered as a natural resource from which, with the help of our intelligence, with the help of our skill, with the help of our understanding, we utilize the wood available from the trees in a much better way, and we transform that wood into the furniture that is available at home. So in that way, forest becomes a natural resource. Now, what is the source of our food? The source of our food is the cereals, pulses, vegetables, etc. that we get from the fields. Then the source of our food is the are the plants, the crop that gives us the food material. Then those plants are the source from which we get the food items. But where do the plants grow? They grow in the fields, they grow in the soil. Then soil is the natural element with which we work and produce crops. Then land or that soil becomes a natural resource. Same way, water that we use to irrigate comes from a source. It is either from a canal, either we pump it out from the ground, or we bring it from the nearby river, lake, anyway. Then water is the source. Those rivers, lakes, canals, underground water, that is the source from where we get water. But water as such is a natural resource. We utilize that in many ways. Same way, the wood which we got can be utilized to make lots of things like cupboards, table, chair, benches, etc. So, students, I hope you understood very well what is a resource. And if it is a natural resource, that means it has been given to us freely by the nature. Now, whatever the human needs are, they can be satisfied partially, that means up to a certain extent, or they can be satisfied completely through the resources. There are thousands and thousands of elements in the nature, but we cannot call all of them resources. Now, why is that so? It is a resource in one or other way, but why can't we call it a resource? Please try to understand the example that I am quoting. For example, there are quite a lot of stones lying on the sides of the road. On both sides of the road, there are lots of stones lying here and there. They are of no use to us. If they are of no use to us, then we cannot call it a resource because they are natural. The stones are found over there naturally and they are in their natural state. But if somebody comes and collects those stones, rocks, pieces of rocks lying over there, and breaks them down into small pieces, then they become a rich source for making or constructing houses, roads, bridges, dams, etc. When we make use of them, then only they become resource. So the materials, the elements that are lying here and there, until we do not make use of them, you cannot call it a resource. They are potential resources which we can use, but we are still not using them. So thousands of elements in the nature are present, but we cannot call all of them resource. Then which elements will we call the resource? The things on which the man is dependent. Human needs can be fulfilled by them, and man has the physical and intellectual capacity to utilize them, can be called as resources. For example, we come to know that at a certain place iron ore is available, then that becomes a potential resource. Until we don't know that in this soil iron ore or iron is found in abundance, if we do not have the knowledge, then it is not a resource. That is just soil and rock for us. But we are dependent on iron ore. We extract the iron from the iron ore, and we make lots of things from a small pin to the big gigantic ships we make out of iron. Then we are dependent on iron and our needs are fulfilled by iron, and we have the physical capacity to use them. If we are making a pin, we have the physical capacity to use it. If we are making a ship, we know how to use it and why we are making it. And we have the intellectual capacity to utilize it to the maximum. For example, from the soil we extracted iron ore, and from iron ore we extracted iron and then utilized it to make a ship. Now we are using our intelligence to find out where iron ore is available, how can that be extracted from the ground, how that iron ore, through which procedure can we extract iron from that iron ore. We have the intelligence for that, we have the intellect for that, and we have made furnaces, we have used lots of other material mixed with iron ore, and then we extracted iron out of that iron ore. After extracting iron, we made use of our intellect in making various things out of iron. So human beings, we are dependent on that natural resource. Our needs are fulfilled by that natural resource. We have the physical and intellectual capacity to utilize them to the full extent. Only then that particular element which is present in the nature can be called a natural resource, or it can be called a resource. Please, students, try to understand the terms, the terminology that is used over here. It will help you to form your answers, and you can use these words in your answers if you know what they mean. Now, utility and capability are the two virtues necessary in a natural resource. Now, what is utility and what is capability? For example, you take the transport in the morning to come to the school, and then again you use the transport, the bus, to reach home. After reaching home, you don't park the bus in the compound, or you don't park it inside your boundary wall. If you are using magic or an auto rickshaw, after reaching home, you don't make the auto rickshaw park inside your compound, because that is a utility. Utility means the service that you are using. For example, city bus, ST bus, railway, that's a utility. We make use of them. It belongs to us or it doesn't belong to us, that is another matter, but we just make use of it. So that is the utility. So that particular natural resource should have a utility, a use of its own. For example, the paper that you are using, it is made out of paper, the wood pulp, and the wood pulp is got from wood is got from forest. Now that is not a single use. Once when you use the paper, when its use is over, we discard the paper, it becomes raddi or pasti, and then we sell it. We sell that raddi or pasti, and then it is recycled. So again we come to use that same thing. So it must have some usability, then only it can be called a natural resource. The next thing is capability. Whatever we are making out of that natural resource, it should have some capability to do something. It should have some work. We should be able to take some work out of it. Then only it can be called a natural resource. So, utility and capability, these are the two virtues. Virtues means the inherent quality, the value that they have. They should have a value and they should have some worth. Then only they can be called a natural resource. As the example I had given about the stone, the stone or the rock piece that is lying on the side of the road does not have any value or worth until somebody collects them and makes use of it. So, it should have utility and it should have capability. That piece of rock, along with lots of other pieces of rock, they help in making a wall. Then it has a usability, it has utility, it is of some, we use it for some service, and it has a capability to become a wall and to protect whatever is inside that wall. So it should be having some usability and it should be having some capability. Then only it can be called a natural resource. Resources are useful to us in many ways. We use lots of resources. We use them because they are useful to us in lots of ways. All activities from agriculture to industries ultimately depend on natural resources. Whether it is agriculture, then we are depending upon the soil, we are depending upon water. Ultimately, we are dependent on natural resources. Even if we take the example of industry, then industry, they get the raw material from natural resources. Even when we are making that in a factory, ultimately we make that particular thing using one or another natural resource. So resources, they are very helpful to us, and whatever activities we are doing, whether it's any activity from agriculture to industry, ultimately or at the end we are dependent on the natural resources. Resources can be used mainly as food, as a source of raw material, and as energy resource. There are lots and lots of uses of resources. So how do we understand this unless we don't do any sort of classification? We don't divide it into some categories, then it is not possible for us to study it. So resources, basically we divide, first thing is we need food. So we divide resources into mainly as food. Second is a source of raw material. You use n number of factories that produce n number of things. Basically all of them are using raw material taken from natural elements. So that is the second way in which we can understand resources, by classifying that as a raw material. And the third is, many resources are there which gives us energy. So it can be used as raw material, used for energy resource. So basically we divide resources into three ways. First for food, second for raw material for industry, and the third is as energy resource. Now let us understand the uses of resources. There are thousands of elements in nature, but we cannot call all of them resources. These elements can be called resources only when they are utilized by man through his special knowledge and expertise. I think we just had a discussion about that. That there are lots and lots of elements present in the nature, but we do not call all of them resource until we are not able to utilize them by the special knowledge that we have, or we have the expertise to convert that resource into something useful for us. Till then we cannot call it a natural resource. Or in other way, we can say the things on which man is dependent, human needs can be fulfilled by them, and man has the physical and intellectual capacity to utilize them only they can be called resources. I think we have discussed this also. Now we try to classify the various resources available to us into first food, then as second as raw material for industry, and the third as a source which will satisfy our energy needs. That is, can be used, elements that can be used as energy resources. These are the three ways in which we try to classify natural resources. So now let us learn the first one as food. Various food requirements of men are satisfied by various resources. We have lots and lots of resources through which we satisfy the requirements. Our food requirements are satisfied by them. For example, fruits are grown naturally. Fruits are also grown by men in their fields as trees, plants. Various crops obtained through agriculture. Human beings with their experience, with their knowledge, with their expertise, with their skill, they do agriculture and they take various crops that satisfy our need for food. We utilize the domestic animals, milking animals, which give us milk. So we utilize the animal resources, domestic animal resources also for making milk and its products. And animals are also a rich source of getting meat from them. So just as our food requirement is satisfied by the plants, trees that we grow in the farm and field, or they are growing naturally to satisfy the food requirements of men, same way using the animals we satisfy the need of milk products and meat obtained through the domestic animals. Then we also use the aquatic animals, the fish and the aquatic animals, uh, which are present in the fresh water, that is rivers, lakes, or the sea water, that is the aquatic animals in all from the reservoirs, that is the dam is called a reservoir, so big water body, man-made water body. Honey prepared by honeybees. We also use the insects, whatever is produced by the insects. For example, honeybees, they produce honey and we utilize it, etc., are used as food items. So we make use of lots of natural elements, nature that is present on the earth. We use it in various ways to satisfy the food requirements of human beings. Now we come to the second classification of resources. That means resources, natural resources being used as a raw material. Various goods obtained from forests, that is wood, leaves, fruit, whatever. Agro products, for example, paper. We already taken that example. Paper comes from the wood pulp that we make, and wood pulp comes from wood. So wood grows in the forest as trees. We collect that, we use it in the industry. Same way, lots of industries, they are dependent on agriculture for their finished products. For example, the bread that we use, the biscuits that we use, they are totally based, they are called agri-based industry or agro-based industry, because they are dependent on agriculture. When the farmer grows wheat and he sells it into the market, somebody buys that, turns that into flour, and the flour is bought by the biscuit makers or the bread makers, and that is how we get bread and biscuit. but bread making and biscuit making industry is dependent on agriculture, so they are available from agro products. So lots of industries are based on agriculture. So agriculture uses the raw material prepared by the farmers. In the same way, we get wool from the sheep. So the wool industry is dependent on the domestic animal sheep to get its raw material. Hides, that is for leather industry, we need the skin of the dead animal, the hide of the dead animal, in order to process it into leather and make things like shoes, belts, etc. And meat available from animals. Animals are reared for the purpose of getting meat from them. So animals are used as a raw material for the meat industry. Mineral ores form the raw material for many industry. Mineral ores, from where we get metal, minerals. So the ore of the minerals from where we get the metal, they become the raw material for lots of other industries. So those industries are dependent on the mineral ore from where we get different types of metals and minerals, and that metal is used as a raw material for making finished products from metal. For example, cars, they are made from aluminium. So the ore from where we get aluminium, then that aluminium which we get from the ore of the aluminium, then aluminium becomes the raw material for the passenger cars that are made by the industry. So in that way, resources are used as a source of raw material for lots and lots of industries. Then we come to resources which can be used as energy resource. Resources which give us energy, we are able to produce energy out of it. Those resources are called energy resource. For example, we use coal to get heat energy. In the earlier days, that heat energy produced from the coal was used to heat the water, and steam was produced. That steam was collected, compressed, and that compressed steam was used as power or energy to turn the wheels, and that is how the railways came into existence, because of the steam engine. Today also, coal is used to produce electricity, to generate electricity by using it for burning, producing heat, heating up the hard water, changing that into steam, and the steam is used to turn the turbines which generate electricity. So we use coal to produce energy. Then petroleum. The petroleum or the crude oil that we get from under the ground just pumped out, and then it is sent to the petroleum refineries, where with the help of distillation process we get different items from crude oil, that is petroleum, diesel, jet fuel, kerosene, lubricants, etc. And we know that petrol and diesel is used in two-wheelers, three-wheelers, four-wheelers. Jet fuel is used in the aeroplane. So petroleum is basically used to make energy resource with which we run engines used in transportation. Same way, diesel is used in lots of industries for producing electricity for heating purpose. So basically we use the petroleum as energy resource. Natural gas that is found at the places where petroleum or crude oil is available. Natural gas that is also the resource. The source is tapped and the natural gas that is released from the earth is collected and it is compressed. So we have the CNG and PNG, compressed natural gas, that we use in the cylinders at home for the cooking purpose. So that gas is used to burn, produce heat and help us to cook. Same way, that is used as fuel in transport vehicles to burn and run the engines. So natural gas is used in industries, natural gas is used in transportation, basically to serve as an energy resource. So natural gas also becomes a rich source of energy as fuel in industry as well as domestic fuel. Besides, energy can be generated through solar insolation. With the help of knowledge and intellect, human beings were able to harness the sunlight received from the sun through the insolation. Insolation means the total amount of sunlight received by an area, that's called insolation. So we trap the sunlight received from the sun and we try to generate electricity with the help of the equipments prepared for trapping the sunlight and converting it into heat energy and electric energy. So sunlight is a natural resource which we turn or make use as energy resource. We also make use of the wind, which is a natural resource. Huge towers are set up where huge fans, the windmill, the windmill, the fans keep moving because of the wind, the strong wind that is found over there. Then that wind is used as a natural resource to turn the fans, which in turn turns the turbines, and electricity is produced with the help of wind energy. Then the motion of the sea waves, they are also used because they come with force. So the energy that is stored in the sea waves, they are used to turn turbines and generate electricity with the help of the tides and ebbs, water which comes towards the land and when water goes away from the land. Both the timings, they are used, that rushing water is used to turn the turbines and produce electricity. That's called tidal energy. Then we use the waterfalls. The water which is falling from a height, it is allowed to fall on the blades of the turbine, and the blades of the turbine, they rotate to produce energy. The same technique is used in the dams. Water is made to fall from a height on the turbine and produce electricity. So all this is used, all these natural resources, they are used as energy resource. Now to understand the natural resources, we do yet another type of classification so that we can understand and learn it in a more better way. Resources are classified in the following ways: on the basis of ownership, to whom they belong; on the basis of re-availability, whether they can be used one time or they are available again, so re-availability; and on the basis of distribution centers. where they are available, and how much can be distributed. That is yet another way in which we classify the natural resources, the resources that we have. So, natural resources or resources, they are simply classified in three ways: ownership, reavailability, and distribution centers. Now, this is a simple chart to explain the classification of resources that we just learned. Classification of resources can be divided into three. The first one is on the basis of ownership, second is on the basis of reavailability, and the third is on the basis of distribution areas. So now let us learn in detail about these three classification of resources. Now let us learn the first one, classification of resources on the basis of ownership. Now we learned that resources can be classified into three: on the basis of ownership, on the basis of the reavailability, and on the basis of the distribution areas. In that, ownership again has three classification. So classification of resources on the basis of ownership can be divided again into three. First one, that resource may be belonging to an individual person, so that is an individual resource. For example, the land that I have belongs to me, then that is a resource which belongs to an individual, so it is an individual resource. Many of the resources are declared as national resource. For example, forests, the rivers, the dams, reservoirs, the seawater near the countries, seashore, all of that, they belong to the nation. That is the property of the nation. So that is a national resource which is available for all the people. It does not belong to one person, it belongs to the whole of the country, and it belongs to all the citizens. Based on ownership, the third classification of resource is it can be a global resource. That means it belongs to everybody present on the earth. It belongs to all the countries, it belongs to whole of humanity. Now look, let us have a look at the same thing, classification of resources based on their distribution. First one is ownership. Then ownership has individual resource, national resource, and global resource. That is what we just learned. Now let us look at the details and examples so that we can understand it better. Individual resource. As I said, a farm belonging to a farmer, that is an individual resource. So that farm is owned by an individual or it belongs to a family. For example, land, building, etc., which belongs to either one person or the complete family, then that is an individual resource. He can use that resource on his own and can do whatever he wants with the resource that he is the owner of. Next is the national resource. Meaning of national resource is it is owned by a country or a region. Now the Himalayas that fall on our side, the rivers that we have, the reservoirs that we have, the forest that we have, all of that is a national resource which belongs to the country. That can be, for example, army. Army is made up of the citizens of that country, so army is a national resource. It belongs, it protects whole of the country. Another example given is international trade. India can sell what it has. So basically, what is a national resource? Only that can be sold to other countries. So whatever the nation is having, as a source or as a resource, only that thing can be sold to other countries. So other countries also they sell it to India when they have of their own. So resource as a national resource. Then we come to the third classification in terms of ownership, that is global resources. The meaning of global resource is all the physical or non-physical resources that belong to humanity. For example, common ownership of all the nation. For example, the air that we breathe. The air is a common resource. It belongs to everybody present on the earth. The big oceans, which are not included in any of the national boundaries, then those oceans, they belong to whole of the humankind. The environment that we have, that is a national resource, but then that also becomes part of the global resource. So common ownership of all the nations, for example, the total vegetative cover that we have, if the line is maintained, if the level is maintained, then it is good for the earth. If the forest cover becomes less and less day by day, then whole of the earth is in grave danger. Same way, the ozone hole, it is everybody's responsibility because that is a common ownership of all the nations. If the ozone hole becomes bigger and bigger, that means harmful rays will reach earth more quickly and they are going to hurt all the living things on the earth. So that is common ownership. Now let us learn something about renewable resource, that is availability of the resource, whether it is available always or when that resource is used up and it is not available. That means re-availability of that resource is there or not. Some resources reproduce themselves as per their usage during specific time. In other words, they are inexhaustible. Some of the resources they come under the category of inexhaustible resource. For example, the sunlight that we receive, the light energy that we receive, the heat energy that we receive from the sun, that is inexhaustible because after every night we are going to have a day and during the daytime we will get that sunlight and the heat of the sun. So that is an inexhaustible resource. Air, we breathe in oxygen and give out carbon dioxide, and that carbon dioxide is consumed by the trees and plants, and again fresh oxygen is given to us. So that is an inexhaustible resource. So some resources reproduce themselves as per their use during a specific time. It needs a little bit of time to regenerate itself. For example, we use up the water, then we wait for the rainy season. When rainy season comes, again the water level is replenished in the rivers, lakes, reservoirs, dams, etc. So it takes some time, but then again the level is fulfilled and we can again make use of the water. So some are inexhaustible resources. Some examples are given to us. For example, solar insolation that we have just discussed. Every day, every new day, we get continuous solar and heat energy from the sun. So that is an inexhaustible resource. Wind. Wind is generated because of the rotation of the earth. So wind is an inexhaustible resource through which we can generate electricity. Birds, they can reproduce. Birds, animals, they can reproduce themselves, so they are inexhaustible resources. They come under that category. Same way, bioresource. All the bioresource plants, the food that we get from plants, the same seeds are used to again grow a plant which will give us more seeds. So in that way, all the bioresources, the fish in the river, they keep on reproducing, and we have enough of it. And the oceans, fish reproduce continuously, and we have enough fish in the seas and oceans. So all the bioresources, they have a capability to regenerate themselves, so they fall under the category of inexhaustible resources. All these things, they are called renewable resources because they can regenerate. It takes some time, but then they can regenerate, and that is why they are called renewable resources. Now, let us have a look at non-renewable resources. Non-renewable resources are those which cannot be reused once they are used, or they cannot be reproduced, or cannot be reformed in near future. For example, coal or petroleum, it has taken millions of years by the nature to make them. Now, once we use them, when a coal is burnt, it is turned into ashes. That ashes cannot be renewed as coal, or we cannot make the coal by ourselves, or we cannot make petroleum by ourselves. So that comes under the category of non-renewable or exhaustible resources. So once they are used, for example, petrol that we fill up in the tank, once that is exhausted, we cannot again remake it. We have to use another. But then we are taking it out of the ground and it becomes less and less. We as human beings, we cannot make petroleum again. That the nature has taken such a long time. So once they are used, they cannot be reproduced, or that cannot be reformed in near future. It will again take millions. It will again make, but then it will take millions of years to make it, or it's going to take a long time to make. Mineral coal, natural gas, petroleum, these are the examples that come under the category of non-renewable resources or exhaustible resources. So because they get exhausted and cannot be remade, that is why they come under the category of non-renewable resources. So students, you can understand that resources are very, very important. Many of them, of course, they can reproduce or they can regenerate, and that is why we can continuously have a constant flow of that resources available to us. But then there are also many resources which come under the category of exhaustible resources, and we cannot reproduce, or that cannot be regenerated by the earth in such a haste, or it cannot be produced in a very short time. So the first thing that comes to mind is, then we should have a planning, and we should conserve the resources that we are having. There should be a proper planning how much to use, and we should have a proper planning how that resource is to be used. Now, talking about whole of the earth, whole of this world, all the nations included, during the last 100 years, usage of resources has increased very much due to the extraordinary development in science and technology, and that is the truth. During the last 100 years, there has been a leaps and bounds increase in the field of science and technology, which has developed such a fast pace, and because of that, more and more of the natural resources or the resources that we are having, are being exploited. Another reason is due to the over increase, the shoot up of the population, the whole of the world over. So, more population means more resources are needed to fulfill the demands created by that population. Severe implications have been experienced. Severe implications will have to be experienced in future if a serious thought is not given to this matter. The way we are consuming the resources available to us, if we don't think now, if we don't plan now, then in the near future we will be having serious trouble, because then the resources will be exhausted and we will be needing them. So, to see that even in future those resources are available to us and the next generation, we should make a proper planning. If the resources are exploited at the current rate at which we are using them, exploited haphazardly, that means without thinking, and irrationally, without any reason, then it will be without any reason or without any rhyme or without thinking, then it will be a dream to maintain the lifestyle that we are right now following, the way we are developing. All of that will be hampered and the current lifestyle will be affected very much. So, it includes planning and conservation of resources, includes things like rational use. That means we should think properly and then make the uses. That's called a rational use. It's conservation. Conservation means we should protect it and also make it available for the future generation. That is called conservation. And we should also think about how to reuse the things that we have used up, how to make a reuse of that same item so that we do not have to touch the original source or the original resource. For example, if we keep on mining the iron ore, then it will be exhausted. But if we keep on recycling the iron that is available with us, then we don't have to dig for more iron. So we should find some way where we can reuse the same that we have already produced or used up. Now, what is the definition for conservation? When there is a danger of existence on the life of a tree or a human life, the arrangement made for it is called conservation. We want to protect a tree so that it is available for us and it is also available to the future generation, then whatever arrangement that we do is called conservation. So it is the duty of all of us to conserve resources for future generation. It becomes our duty. If we use up everything, then the future generation will not have anything. So it is our duty to make available for them. Resources should be conserved and should be used rationally. That means with a proper planning, giving it a proper thought. So students, we stop over here for today's lecture and let us have a look at today's assignment. Today's assignment is as follows. Question number 1, what is a resource? 2 marks. Question number 2, describe the various uses of resources. 3 marks. Give the classification of resources. A, used as resources based on ownership. B, resources based on the basis of distribution area. Question number 3, repeating, give the classification of resources. A, that are based on ownership, and B, that are based on the distribution area. Question number 4, define resources based on their re-availability. There is 3 marks. Repeating, define resources that are based on their re-availability. Question number 5, why is there a need of planning and conservation of resources? Question number 5, why is there a need of planning and conservation of resources? 3 marks. Thank you, students.